Ukrainian city of Dnipro becomes the first city in human history to be attacked by an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM. Russian dictator is obviously enraged. Learn why in our topics. Biden did Trump a favor with US missiles in Ukraine. Or not? And a third topic, James Sher, Senior Fellow of the International Center of Defense and Security Talent, Estonia, is with us tonight. Interview at UATV English. And good afternoon. These topics in more detail. My name is Henry Keane and we are UATV English, bringing you the hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. For the first time since the beginning of not only its full-scale criminal invasion, but first time ever in any armed conflict in humankind history, Russia has launched an intercontinental ballistic missile targeting Ukraine, specifically the city of Dnipro. The Ukrainian Air Force confirmed that Russia launched a series of missile strikes on Ukraine, escalating its offensive with the launch of an ICBM from the Astrakhan region. In particular, an intercontinental ballistic missile was launched from the Astrakhan region of the Russian Federation, the Air Forces said. ICBMs, as you can see, are capable of striking targets thousands of miles away and are designed to deliver nuclear warheads. However, they can also be equipped with conventional warheads. The attack comes 2 days after Russian dictator Putin signed a revised nuclear doctrine that formally lowers the threshold for the country's use of nuclear weapons. Ukraine on Tuesday fired several American-supplied longer-range missiles and reportedly fired UK-made Storm Shadows on Wednesday into Russia. In easy terms, what you just saw is a message of sorts from an outraged Russian Tsar to the world. I am pissed off, says His Majesty Putin I. Those storm shadows overshadowed my impunity in Ukraine, and here I am, going intercontinental, and I might also go nuclear. Well, let me put this hard truth in easy terms for you in our next topic. The fact is, Biden let Ukraine use ATACMS, which have a range up to 190 miles. This week, our armed forces fired the first salvo, hitting an ammunition depot in Russia. The French and British, who have supplied the Ukrainians with their versions of such weapons, can now follow Biden's lead and let Kiev have at it. Biden's permission was long overdue, yes. The ostensible reason for Biden's shift is that Putin escalated first. By inviting his new brothers-in-arms from North Korea to join the fight on Russia's side, Russians and North Koreans are massing for a counterattack to retake the Russian region of Kursk. The Russians have also stepped up their bombing of Ukraine's civilian infrastructure to make the Ukrainian winter cold, dark and deadly. Bloomberg calls it a moot question whether Biden in the past could have put Ukraine in a better strategic position by being quicker to let fire the ATACMS, or indeed by providing all-American aid more swiftly and decisively. Well, for us in Ukraine, it is no moot nor even a question. Yes, Biden could do it and did not do it in time back then, but he did it now. And we, in Ukraine, finally can fight back and not only sit and wait until Putin escalates and some son of a Trump turns a blind eye to it. We understand the reason for Biden's reticence, though highest objective of his was and still is to avoid stumbling over Putin's red lines and triggering a direct confrontation between American and Russian forces or Russian attack on Ukraine on the west with tactical nuclear weapons. For 1,000 days, that is since the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Washington and other NATO capitals have debated whether Putin's nuclear threats are credible. This week, Putin signed off on the new doctrine. Boo! What Biden understands, however, is that timing matters. Right now, Putin is trying to be as aggressive and strong in Ukraine as possible to prepare for the new and unpredictable era of geopolitics that starts on Inauguration Day in the US, January 20th. The more territory and other levers Putin holds, the better his bargaining position, not so much vis-à-vis Kiev, but across the table from Trump. At the same time, Putin would never choose the next 2 months to go nuclear. And here is why in easy terms. that would forfeit the support of China that he was so diligently cultivating, and also that of Global South. I mean, from India to Africa, and in fact, most of the world. That would also wreck the relationship with Trump if that is not already the case. So, as Trump's entire national security idea, foggy as it is, rests on the paradigm peace through strength, so he would have to respond to even a limited Russian nuke with demonstrative, if not nuclear, military might. That has also been Biden's plan, by the way, since 2022 and remains exactly that to this very day. So Putin doesn't want to up the bet that much. If he retaliates for the ATACMS and Storm Shadows before Inauguration Day, he'll likely do so with more grey zone operations. And this week, somebody cut 2 undersea data cables connecting NATO countries in the Baltics. But the West has already said it's okay. We don't see it as a deliberate act of Russian sabotage, just a coincidence. Probably that, as we all know, happens to underwater fiberglass cables every now and then. In general, politicians in US and in Europe always tend to be a specific sort of blindness, use it as a way to counter objective reality, helping them to only see things in a way they want to see them. It is called selective blindness. Selective blind official Collective West preferred not to see Putin's escalation before he went intercontinental. Selectively blind official Collective West preferred not to see North Korean troops in Ukraine until it came absolutely undeniable. Selective blind Collective West preferred not to see Chinese weapons delivered to Russia and to stay blind to Russia buying components to its missiles used to terrorize Ukraine every day. Now, the intercontinental missile used to attack Ukraine for the first time ever in human history. And red alert blaring in the air right now as you're watching this, and this is no exaggeration. I will hear the sirens when I walk out of this studio. So, do you think selectively blind Collective West will now see what is going on in Ukraine? I mean, Western satellites can actually get a picture of me in this very studio, but they can't confirm Russia's using intercontinental missiles. I guess 2 or 3 years would need to pass before selectively blind Western politicians start to see things as they really are and call a spade, as it was exactly the case with the ATACMS. James Shah, Honorary Fellow, International Center for Defense and Security, Tallinn, Estonia, and Associate Fellow, Russia and Eurasia Program, London, is with us tonight. Mr. Shah. Hello. Good evening. It's a pleasure. My question.
For me.
Yeah, surely. Yeah, well, the pleasure is all mine. So let's get to the questions. All these peace initiatives of Western leaders. Do you believe that all these negotiations with Putin and Russia are actually possible?
Yes, they're possible, but let's begin by noting that so much depends upon Donald Trump, who's giving very little away about what his actual plans are. We know what his intentions are. He wants to end the war. He doesn't want it to continue it under any circumstances. But the problem is we have a series of very fixed realities and starting conditions that don't lend themselves very easily to compromise or negotiation. We know that Vladimir Putin has not altered his basic objectives, which are to destroy Ukraine's sovereignty and statehood and neutralize it and denazify it as well, which means to change it internally. We know that the bare minimum primordial interests of Ukraine are to preserve its sovereignty and statehood and to do so by tangible means, which either means NATO membership or hard treaty-based defense guarantees outside NATO. So what is very clear is that whatever Trump's plan is, it is not going to produce peace in 24 hours or anything like it.
But
His plans and intentions will collide with reality
oh yeah,
sooner rather than later. And the question then is what happens next? And that is where Europe's role becomes very interesting, but also the role of some people in his administration whose position towards Ukraine is more positive than many think. I'm speaking about his national security advisor and Marco Rubio, his nominee, who will almost surely be confirmed for Secretary of State. And then there is Europe. I'm persuaded in my own mind that if Trump plans, either as simply in the form of a threat or a means of pressure, to cut Ukraine loose and curtail all US assistance to Ukraine, that Europe is not going to go along with that. Europe is not going to go along with enforced neutrality either. But the question is, how does Europe actually establish
oh yeah,
its influence and leverage, both over
absolutely.
Trump and over Russia? And in order to do that, and I think this is well understood amongst most of the key players now, Europe has to meet Trump's basic condition, which ought to be our basic condition, that it put itself in a position where it can bring its proper weight into the scales when it comes to providing defense and security on the continent. And that means much higher levels of defense spending. It means some serious internal efforts to get its notional capacity, turn its notional capacity in defense and technology into something cohesive and real.
Right.
It requires all these difficult things. And I think that today, compared to a year ago, it's impressive to what extent the will to do these things is actually there.
I agree with that. You actually just answered my next question. European security policy, how the war in Ukraine changing and what it is now, and how the new U.S. administration may affect it. You already answered that. I mean, Europe, collective Europe needs a new security policy of sorts. Let's slide to another question. But do you believe the United States and Europe can put a pressure onto Russia and get a result? Not just putting a pressure and saying and calling, but to get a firm result of that pressure. Is that even possible?
I have no doubt. But I have no doubt of that if the will is there.
Right. Well, if the will is there.
And the means either exist now or they can exist in a relatively short period of time. I mean, let me give you one example about something that we did not speak about enough. Europe on its own, without the United States, can make a decision to unfreeze Russian assets and transfer them to Ukraine. The sums of that are enormous. This does not require US consent. I'm not saying Trump will like it, but this is an indication of how much power Europe has if it's willing to use it. There's also the question of NATO. The Secretary General of NATO is supposed to represent a consensus, but both this Secretary General and the previous one have made it very clear they're going to uphold previous NATO policy, and NATO policy is predicated on ultimate membership of Ukraine and NATO, which is something Russia flatly objects to. So leverage is there, but there's a key distinction that I think we lose sight of, and that is the distinction between Russia's willingness to agree to something.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And its willingness to accept it. I mean, let's be clear. Before the Cold War ended, the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany, became the fourth economy in the world. It had the strongest land army on the continent of Europe,
Mm.
there was no agreement about this. There were the Potsdam Accords, which were provisional and which arranged
Right.
modalities between different zones of occupation. There was no agreement. These were facts that were established in the end by the consensus of Europe, underpinned by the power of the United States, and came very close to war at one point in Berlin in 1948-49. And the Soviets had to accept it. They never agreed to it. The Korean Peninsula, South Korea today, one of the most prosperous, successful, powerful countries in the world. There was no agreement about any of this. It has a defense treaty with the United
Mm.
States.
Mm.
There's no agreement about any of this.
No.
The war was
No.
simply ended by an armistice. That peace has lasted since 1954. Why? Because the correlation of forces has made it possible to preserve that peace.
Well, exactly. I mean, absolutely. There's nothing I can disagree with you here. Absolutely, just maybe the lack of will from Europe's. You say if you said it, if the will is there, if the will is there, Europe can do all sorts of things to deter Putin, to make him go away, or to persuade him of sorts, or without any of consent from his side, just to make him do things. Because what I see now is nothing, is more like talking, almost nothing. But I think you will agree with me, if things are not done in full, they're not done enough, then nothing is done. So maybe, all right, let's say the will is there and the means are also there. But we heard the saying, just peace for Ukraine. And we in Ukraine know what it means. But do you believe, sir, that anyone in the West and in Europe and in America actually cares for that peace to actually be just for Ukraine?
Lots of people do. As I was
Mm.
saying a moment ago, I think the majority of Europe does. There's certain things that Donald Trump might be willing to accept that Europe will
Right,
not
right.
accept. And this will make
Great.
life very difficult for the US administration. And they will have allies in the United States. And I don't simply mean the
That is
opposition
true.
party.
That is true.
So
Right.
we're not dealing with that situation. The key issue today, if I may say so, is not so much Europe's will. It's the will of the United States.
It is. It is.
Trump is determined whatever happens, there'll be no US forces in Ukraine. A number of European states are talking about creating an effective buffer sanctuary in certain western oblasts of Ukraine
Right.
with their defense capabilities and some forces on the ground. We are talking, a number of countries are talking about, we already have some bilateral security guarantees, which certainly need to be strengthened. The issue is what the United States is willing to do as the United States. And here is the interesting part.
Oh, yeah. This
The,
policy is.
the
Pardon me.
Europeans, I think, stand a good chance of meeting American demands, very just demands in our collective interest,
Mm.
to provide much more for our own defense. But once we do that, that doesn't mean that we then have to do what the Americans want. One of the reasons for doing that
Right.
is that we acquire the ability to do what we want. And as this reality becomes clear in the United States, I think some adjustments are going to be inevitable. So when Trump defines his intentions, we hope sooner rather than later, it's not the end of the story.
No, it's not. You're right.
And also, let's add another factor, which I don't really need to add for your audience. Whatever is agreed outside Ukraine, Ukraine is not going to agree to die.
Oh, yeah. I know
The
that.
only route to accepting Putin's objectives, such as they are, is through slaughter. Ukraine is not going to agree to what Russia wants. No Ukrainian government can afford to agree to what Putin wants. That's a reality as well. So let's not play Russia's game by forgetting that Ukraine is a key, if not the key actor in its own drama.
Sir, thank you so very much for that, for the key. I love it. The key to the castle, the key to the just peace. Amen to that. And thank you so very much for your time and for your experience. You just cleared the fog for our audience. I just remind you, it was James Sher, Honorary Fellow, International Center for Defense at Tallinn, Estonia. Thank you so very much, and we hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, and see you soon in person, I hope.
I hope so
Bye-bye.
very much. Thank you. Goodbye. That was it for tonight. My name is Henry Keane. We are UATV English, doing our best to deliver hard truth in easy terms for the whole free world, directly from Ukraine. Please like, share and comment. Your voice really matters, as it helps in turn Ukrainian voice to be heard globally. Stay safe and tune for more. Goodbye.